Awesome. All right. So tonight, what we're getting into is fears. And where we're gonna dive in and where we're gonna pick up in the book is the very bottom of page 67, starting with notice the word fear. And so one of the things is, as we go through the fear sections, if my columns look different than how you were taught to do fears, and if some of the things I'm telling you, and I'm going to point out where the columns that I get come from in the book, but if anything that I tell you is different to what your sponsor tells you or how you've done it before, you're right. And I'm wrong. I'm wrong. And so come and do it the wrong way. It'll be fun. Have a new experience. It'll be great. But just know, yeah, that's okay. So what we're going to do is focus just on fear. So it says, bottom of 67, notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Miss Jones, the employer, and the wife. And so where we see that is in the example that was on page 65. And where they were getting the fears from was from their third column. Now, what we found as we went through resentments, we saw that we made a lot of decisions based on these fears that put us in a position to have these resentments, to be resentful, to be upset. So that's also where we're going to look for our fears. And we'll get into it a little bit more, but the perfect thing to do is I have all those fears in my column 4 of resentments. A great place to put them is column 1 of fears. So it says that this short word, fear, somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. And so what that means is, imagine your life is like a blanket. The existence of your life is like a blanket. And every 5, 10, even 50 threads is a thread that eats away at the rest of the blanket. It's not going to take long for you to have nothing left. And that is what fear does to our lives. But of course, when I get here, I don't think that, and I don't know that, and I don't see the depth of fear that I have, and I don't see fear's destructive power. But I begin to when I get into that 4th column of resentments. So it set in motion trains of circumstance which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. Isn't that true? And I'll let you know, I don't think that I have ever fallen into any misfortune that I was like, this is deserved. I deserve this misfortune. All of the misfortune that I've fallen into has felt I didn't deserve. But also, I love that word trains of circumstances, because I have the same with my sponsees. And I joke with them, but sometimes it's when my sponsees are making some not great decisions, usually around romantic relationships. And I'm like, dude, the train has left the station. And what that means is, if you've ever seen like a train, most trains, once they get going, it's incredibly hard to stop them, right? You need to have a great distance to try to get that train to a stop. And so fear is setting off these things where it's like, it's going and I can't stop it. And has that not been time after time after time, my experience? It says, but did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? Really rude of you to call me out this early in the fear section. You know, I was kind of hoping I'd be called out a little more like some later columns, but here we are, right? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. So it says, we reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. So you can make a little note for how we're doing it. That is going to be our column 1. And so one of the things, I'll show you how we set up the page. Oh, no, this notebook. You can tell I'm well prepared. What we do is we have one line across the page horizontally and 2 lines up the page vertically. And for those of you who have been coming here regularly, you're like, yes, Paige. Yes, Paige, we know. We know. But if you're new to the study or you're just hopping in as we're going through it, this is how we're going to set up the page. 1 line across, 2 lines up. And this is how we set up every piece of paper that we're going to use on our 4-step inventory. It keeps it real simple. And of course, I make that joke that can't draw too many lines. That wasn't ever a problem before. Too many lines. Am I right? Yeah. So that's what we're doing. Line, line, line. And so what we're going to do, column 1 is going to be this, this section right here. And so when we look at column 1, what we're doing is we're writing down fears. And the first place we can get our fears from is our resentments list, from that 4th column of resentments. Now, when we're talking about fears, the type of fears that we're talking about isn't so much snakes and spiders and heights. It's not those types of fears. What we're looking at is self-centered fears. Now, self-centered fears can always fall into 2 categories. The first category is I'm not going to get what I want. Second category, I'm going to lose something that I have. You'll notice there's a thread in there. It's self-centered fear. So what we're not really looking at is snakes and spiders. We're looking at more those common fears: rejection, abandonment, that no one will ever love me, that I'll die alone, that at the depth of who I am inherently unworthy. You know, just those like easy breezy ones, right? And so, yeah, resentments, column 4, that's where we get them. Another place is, you remember when we did column 1 for resentments, we could look up a step 4 resentment prompt sheet. And that step 4 resentment prompt sheet gave us a list of things or people or institutions, principles that we can resent. Well, we can do that with fears. And so this is an example. I'm just going to share the screen of a list of fears that we can have. So it says fear of God, fear of dying, fear of insanity, fear of insecurity, rejection, loneliness, diseases, alcohol, drugs, relapse. It goes on to say employment, but also unemployment, fears of losing a loved one. And it does say animals and insects. So if you do pray and you feel called to put it down, put it down. But what we're looking at is fear of the unknown, fear of change, fear of confrontation, fear of getting old, fear of dying, fear of writing inventory, scared to do a 4-step. This is a perfect place to put it, in your 4-step. If I'm afraid of sponsoring others, I'm afraid that I'm going to ruin them. I'm afraid that I'm going to make them relapse somehow. Put it down. Fear of sponsoring. If I'm afraid of making my step 9 amends, I can write that down. Fear of amends. And so what we're looking at here is those self-centered fears. You know, we can see that we have failure, success. We have fears of gossip and judgment and criticism and those sorts of things. And that's really what we're looking for. I'm going to do stop share. And like what we did with resentments, what we're really going to do is 1 column at a time. So what we're going to do is we're going to write fear of rejection, flip the page. Fear of abandonment, flip the page. Fear of being alone, flip the page. Fear of success, flip the page. Fear of failure, flip the page. You know, and then go on and on and on. And when we're done all of column 1, what we're then going to do is go into column 2. Does that make sense so far? Yeah, thumbs up and nods. We're good. Okay. It'd be not good if there was blank stares. All right. So that's going to be our column 1. Now, going back to the top of page 68, it says, we asked ourselves why we had them. For our purposes today, that is going to be column 2. Why do I have this fear? And so when we look at column 2, like let's look at fear of rejection, because honestly, just like mom, dad, the ex tend to be our go-tos with resentments, fear of rejection, fear of abandonment seem to be our go-tos with fears. So I'd write out all my fears, column 1, rejection. And when I was done, I would go to column 2. Why am I afraid of being rejected? Well, it's happened before. It's painful. It means no one will love me and I'll die alone and I'm unworthy. Does that make sense? But what we have in column 2 is it then gives us, and my sponsees hate this, so I'm really sorry. And if you need to add me to your resentments list, go back, throw me out. But that gives us more fears to add to column 1. So that gives us what? Fear of pain, fear of being unloved, fear of dying alone, right? So those are more fears that I can add to column 1. Um, and so it says, goes on to say, self-reliance was actually, before I do that, this is a whole different type of inventory that I just want to share my experience with. Not many years ago, many years ago, just a while ago, I had this situation where I had this fear, and it was just on me. And I was writing inventory, and I was doing it this 4-column way, and I just couldn't quite shake it. I was taking it to prayer. I was doing meditations on it, and it was on me. And I was speaking with my sponsor, and she said, why don't you do a because fear inventory? And what that looked like was I write the fear, so fear of rejection, and I take the second column and I go because. So fear of rejection, because it means that no one will like me. And I'm afraid of that because I need people to like me to be okay. Because I seek my value and worth from others. Because I have a sense of separateness from God. Now, this isn't how we're going to do our inventory, but I just wanted to share my experience with that. Because when I did inventory that way, I saw that all of these fears, almost all of them, when I took them to my natural conclusion, it was because I had a sense of separateness from God. And that was why I had those fears. And so in the third column, going back to the top of page 68, it says, wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? And that is going to be our column 3, self-reliance. It says self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. And so what we're trying to see is in this third column, what we're going to do is write it in on how self-reliance has failed me. Another way to look at it is, how has me relying on me made this fear worse or made this fear happen? And it's one of those things. In step 1, I realized that I have absolutely no power over my alcoholism. I am powerless over that. And in step 3, what I come to see is that I'm also powerless over my selfishness and my self-centeredness, and I can't overcome self without my own power. And then I, dive into that 4th step. I launch in and I go to my resentments, and I turn to find out I can't overcome those on my own power. And then I come to fears. And what is it saying here? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't work. It didn't work. And when I get filled of cockiness and arrogance, man, it makes the whole thing worse. So some bad news is I also can't overcome fear with self. And what I've found is this process of the 12 steps, and I'll probably talk about this again. See, in so many areas of my life, I think what I'm trying to do is like climb this ladder of success, to be better and to do better and to achieve more. And if I was somebody that did a corporate job, you'd want to get the promotion, and I'm clearly not. I'm clearly not one of those human beings. But that's not what this is. This isn't climbing the ladder of success in my experience. It's giving more and more of myself to that unconditional love that is God. And that's what this process is. And I know, when I got here, I wasn't excited about that either. I wasn't like, oh boy, I just can't wait to give myself over to God's unconditional love. That doesn't sound old and lame and stupid at all. I got here young. And I know some of you are like, what are you, 12? In a Batman hoodie? I mean, I'm 13. Sober, anywho, sorry. But yeah, Batman hoodie. And so I'll just also show, I'll go into the next paragraph, and then I'll show you kind of what the columns look like in a little mock-up that I made. So it says, perhaps there is a better way. We think so. For we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. Hey, when did I decide that would be my basis? Step 3. Step 3 is when I signed that employment contract. And again, we see that this is a callback to that 3rd step decision. We are in the world to play the role he assigns, right? I got fired from the management position of my life. God is my employer. I'm working for God. And so that's my job, to go out and do God's will. And I love this next sentence. Just to the extent that we do as we think he would have us and humbly rely on him, does he enable us to match calamity with serenity. And you can make a little note that that is a promise. That is our fear promise. And see, that's the thing. Sometimes I tease about the step 9 promises. I'll be like, oh, they're lame. They're not lame. They're wonderful. But I do that to direct our attention to all these other promises that are in the book. And this one's powerful. So to the extent that I do what I think, like I don't know, but do what I think God would have me do and who God would have me be to the best of my ability. And I say I don't know. What I mean is, in my experience, I don't know the fine point details, right? I don't know where I'm supposed to live in the world. I think I do, and I think I know who I should marry or those sorts of things. But that's none of my business, a lot of that stuff. The role that God assigns for me is to be of love and service. The role that God assigns for me is to be an expression of God's love in everything I do. That's it. Like that's, what's God's will? For me, love and service, especially for people who have suffered the way that I've suffered and gone through what I've gone through, because I've been specifically created to help them. And so, as to the extent that I rely on God, does he enable us to match calamity with serenity? And we spoke about calamity, especially when we were agnostics, and we were talking about our friend Fitz Mayo and the calamities that he experienced in his immediate family that embittered and depressed him. And it was fatal illness, suicide, business failure. See, calamities, let's be real. I will take a like molehill and make it a mountain. I will create calamities out of thin air. You know what I mean? I will take a perfectly good day and ruin it with my thinking. Absolutely. Nothing has happened and I can't function anymore. You know what I mean? I'll do that. But there are times in life where there is calamity. And there's calamity not because I'm an alcoholic. There is calamity because that is a part of life. Because there's pain and there's suffering and there's death and there's loss and there's illness. There is calamity. But that calamity, that pain is matched with serenity. And what a beautiful promise. And I want you to know that that has been my experience. And I know, it's like, what are you, 12? How much experience do you have? But I've had calamity in my life. I've had, illness where, I use a wheelchair. I've gone through traumatic things. I've gone through traumatic losses. And to the extent that I rely on that power, which is God, and show up and take these spiritual actions on a daily basis, has that been my experience, that calamity is matched with serenity. And man, when that happens, again, I know it wasn't me. I didn't do it. You know what I mean? I didn't create, there is no serenity that is created within me in and of myself. I am not an agent of serenity. I am an agent of chaos and worry. That is how I do. That is how I show up in life. And so when I've experienced that serenity, man, I know it wasn't me. I know it happened to me. And I know it is grace. Grace is just an unearned gift. I knew it was a gift. So it says we never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality the way of weakness. Paradoxically, it is the way of strength. And see, that's the thing. One of my barriers to the idea of God or power greater than myself when I got here was that it wasn't really cool. Like I wasn't, tough and strong and brave. Got to rely on God. Now, keep in mind, I probably wasn't tough and strong and brave as I'm wetting myself behind a dumpster smoking crack. You know what I mean? Just throwing that out there. I was attached to this idea of like, I can do it. I cannot do it. I cannot. And when it says it is the way of strength, it is the way of strength because especially when we're first taking the actions of these steps for the very first time, it is a leap of faith. And it takes courage to take that leap of faith. But also when we do it, it really is a strength that is not my own. And it says, all men of faith have courage. They trust their God. And I just want to speak about that a little bit, because I think I spoke about this a little last week as well. But that idea where sometimes we'll say fear and faith can't live in the same house. And I don't know if that's true for me, because I almost can't have faith if I don't have fear. You know, like I can't have courage if there's not something to be scared of, right? And see, if there's nothing to be scared of, I don't need faith, because what I have is trust, you know? And so often what I've found is that self-centeredness, including self-centered fear and serenity, that they can't live in the same house. And that has been my experience. And so what happens is I come here and I just have that belief that thing that worked in your life could work in mine. And then I begin to take the actions, and that grows to faith. And after repeated action and repeated results, see, I take this work, I take these actions, I get these promises, that faith does grow to trust. And I can trust in the God of my understanding. It says we never apologize for God. Instead, we let him demonstrate through us what he can do. And I love that. We don't see the St. Francis prayer here in the big book, but man, I love that prayer. See, whenever there is anything that I am scared to do, that I am overwhelmed to do, that I know I can't do on my own strength, I'm reminded that I'm not the one doing it. What I am trying to do is get enough of me out of the way so that power that is God can work through me. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to let God work through me. And I have a wonderful friend who talks about it's not like let go and let God, as in I let go and God's over there doing it. No, I let go of my delusion of control and I let God work through me. And man, when I show up in that way, it changes things. It says what we ask. And whenever in this book we ask, what that is a prayer. So this is the step 4 fear prayer. And we're going to be saying it a lot as we go through fears. We're going to be saying it a lot. I don't know about you. I will speak for myself. I will be saying it a lot as I continue to go through life and set in motion trains of circumstance, which I don't know if I deserve. But as I set that off, right? So this is the prayer. We ask God to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be. And so that's the prayer. And I love that the prayer says not do, but be. What would you have me be? It says at once we commence to outgrow fear. And so in that paragraph that we read, that's where we get the directions for that 4th column of fear. And that 4th column of fear is how can God reliance overcome that fear? And I'm just going to bring up the sort of what the fears columns looks like when they're kind of all set out. So again, what we'll have is column 1, fear. So I'll go fear of rejection, flip the page, fear of abandonment, flip the page, fear of intimacy, flip the page, fear of sex, flip the page. I say that because they're different, and I didn't know that when I got here. Fear of failure, flip the page, fear of success, flip the page. And when I've got all my fears done, I go into column 2. Because it's painful, because no one loves me, because I'm unloved, I'm unworthy, because I've had experiences like this. And I get into column 2 and I write them out, and that gives me more fears to add to column 1. And I add to column 1. And then we write on how self-reliance has failed me. And I want you to know I do understand that this is kind of a difficult concept to do without examples. So let's take the example of rejection. And so when I look at my fear of rejection, how has self-reliance failed me? So what happens when I rely on me and I rely on my power? Well, the first thing that happens to me When I rely on self is I get drunk and high. And I'm just saying that I am not the social butterfly that I think I am when I'm in my full-blown active addiction, my full-blown active alcoholism. I'm hurting people with my behavior. I'm pushing people away. I'm behaving in ways that lower my sense of worth and self-esteem. Ultimately, there's that. What I can also look at is, I don't know about you, I'm afraid of rejection, so I'll reject you before you even get to know me. I also have a penchant for isolating. I'm not going to get to know anyone, so you don't reject me. I also will do this thing and have in the past where I hang out with maybe lower companions so that they don't reject me. And when I say lower companions, what I mean is people who are unhealed as well, who don't have the ability to show up in a loving, God-centered way because they're in as much pain as I am. I'll also do this thing where my relationships become about what I can get, and I don't even see it. See, I need you to like me. I need you to validate me. I need you to tell me that I'm worthy. And if you don't, I'm not okay. And so my relationship is about getting from you and getting from you. And I need you to like me, and I need you to like me and tell me I'm okay. And that's draining. And I'm more likely to be rejected. And even if I am, and even when I am, the rejection hurts more because I've put my sense of value and worth and esteem in what I think you think of me. And then one of the things I'll do a lot. One of the things that I'll do as well in terms of how self-reliance has failed me is I don't know how to communicate at all. So I won't tell you when behavior's not okay. I won't communicate boundaries. And I'll let things build up until I have an explosion of anger. And I don't know how to amend it. I don't know how to make it right. And all of those put me in a position of where self-reliance, me relying on me and my own power, have failed me. And so when I'm done all of my column 3s, I'll get into column 4. But before we do any column 4, we always pray. Always pray. And so we use the fear prayer. So God, remove my fear. And how I like to say it is I like to throw in the fear exactly as it is. So God, remove my fear of rejection and direct my attention to what you would have me be. And then I write on column 4, how God reliance can overcome this fear. Now, as we write on it, there's 2 levels to it. There's going to be the surface level and the deeper level. And the surface level is, if I'm relying on God, I am going to be fully active in all 12 steps as a way of life. And as a result, I'm not going to relapse. I'm going to stay sober. And as a result of staying sober, I'm probably going to act in a way that I'm less likely to be rejected, right? Sorry, I just got noted there was like participants can now see your application. I'm like, you guys, I hope you could see it before, and I just wasn't talking to a dark screen. Otherwise, that's my bad, you guys. Also, what am I doing? I'm showing up to meetings. I'm showing up in the spirit of love and service to sponsoring others. I'm not isolating. I'm making more connections and connecting with others. I'm also connecting with people who are also in recovery and are more likely, not perfect. We all know people who are unwell in recovery, but as I get healthier, as a result of the 12 steps, I'm more likely to attract healthy people in my life. I can also look as I practice honest communication. I practice setting, respecting, maintaining boundaries. I practice amending when I'm wrong. I have a daily prayer and meditation practice, so I'm able to show up in a kinder, loving way. I'm sponsoring others, so my orientation becomes about, and really, we talk about this in working with others, where really how I show up to life, focused on what I can give rather than get. How can I show up and be of love and service? How can I make that person in the corner who feels uncomfortable feel comfortable? How can I let people know that I'm happy to see them and their life has value and worth? When I show up in that way, man, that has time after time after time become the cure for social anxiety for me, because my relationships become about what I can give rather than get, because I'm actively seeking worth, value, esteem from God through prayer, through meditation, through these 12 steps. And so the problem is I didn't write these things down. That's why we got to do pen to paper. So I can't remember all of the things that I said in column 3. But a lot of what we'll do in column 3 is we'll flip it and write in column 4. So if I'm isolating in column 3, I'm connecting with others in column 4. If my relationships are about what I can get and I'm self-centered, my relationships in column 4 become about what I can give and I become God-centered. And that's, and we write how, right? Because I'm working the steps, because I'm focusing on others, right? And that's the surface level. So when I show up in that loving, God-centered, ready and willing to admit when I'm wrong and clear away my past and practice communicating with others, I'm less likely to be rejected. But the deeper level is even if this fear happens. So in this case, even if I am rejected, if I rely on God, I will be okay. And I will use this experience to help others. And see, that's the thing. When I've gone through things in my life that have been incredibly painful, and I'm talking in the last few years when, I've been fully active and fully doing this deal. Sometimes just knowing that I will help somebody with this experience has been more than enough to get me through it. And sometimes how I write this is to the absolute most extreme with that 4th column. So sometimes I'll write it is, even if I am rejected by everyone on earth and they all hate me, if I rely on God, I will be okay. And I will use this experience to help others. So I sometimes really like writing it to that nth degree, just to see how, in many cases, unfounded these fears are. I'm just going to stop the share. Does that make sense for everyone? Cool. All right. So again, one of the best ways to kind of really explain how we do fears is by doing fears. So does anyone, type it in the chat, have a fear that we could take through the fear columns? Don't make me wait too long, because then there'll be an awkward pause and people that are just listening will be like, what happened? Was there a glitch? Do you have any fears? I know none of you guys have any fears. You're very, yeah, wonderful. Awesome. Thank you. All right. So column 1, death. Column 2, why do I have this fear? Because it's permanent. Because I don't have control. Because it's change. Because of the fear of the unknown. Because it might be painful. Because I might miss out. And so those, and I know it'd be good if I was trying to see if I could get the whiteboard to work so I could type sort of all of this stuff out, but growing out a little alone. Awesome. I'll do that one next, Tom. Thank you. So fear of death. And so we see how those in column 2, those other fears that I have, fear of physical pain, fear of permanency, fear of things that I don't have control over, fear of the unknown. It expands it. Oh, awesome. Yeah, we're going to go through all of these fears. Thank you, guys. I so appreciate it. And so in column 3 for fear, oh, wonderful. Yeah. We'll go through all of them. All right. So in column 3 for fear of death. Well, I don't know about you, but how I was living my life, I was shortening it. And I was shortening it with the substances I was using, the amount that I was drinking, the drugs that I was taking. And just about me, I was an incredibly suicidal person. I was taking active steps to end my life. Again, I don't know about you, but the way in which I was living my life with a lot of regrets. I was living my life just hurting people, hurting myself. And at the point where life was kind of miserable and in agony. A lot of, what I was doing was also isolating myself from other people, where I wasn't as connected and I was alone. And, and a lot of times I was trying to control things that I had no control over, which made things worse. So does that make sense for column 3 for that one? All right. So we'll say the prayer, God, remove my fear of death and direct my attention to what it is you would have me be. So as I rely on God, I'm going to be fully active and engaged in all 12 steps as a way of life. And as a result, I'm going to stay sober. which is going to do wonders for my life expectancy, especially for somebody with a terminal disease, addiction, alcoholism, fatal, right? I'm doing well, right? Also, as I'm doing this work, as I'm praying, as I'm meditating, that lowers, and I'm talking about in a real functional way, that lowers my stress level. That lowers the cortisol that, calms the heart rate. I'm probably just going to be overall a little bit healthier. As I'm continuing to grow in my emotional sobriety, I'm less likely to turn to those things like food, and there's no judgment, by the way, but just those other things that we turn to that maybe aren't the best for our health, right? Also, prayer, meditation, making amends, right? When I make amends, I clean up that past and I don't live in that guilt and that shame. So that time that I have is far less in that regret and remorse, Being in the present moment, I get to actively enjoy the present moment. I get to be in the here and now. I also get to live a life where it really becomes worth living as a result of sponsoring others. I have meaning and purpose in my life. And we get to do some really cool, incredible, fun things. Travel. There's other things, but I sometimes when I joke with people, I'm like, it's windsurfing or crochet. I don't know. Because I don't have a lot of hobbies, but you can have hobbies, so many hobbies, not instead of, it's after we work these 12 steps and we bring this way of life into our life. Man, we get to do incredible things, travel around the world, do those things we always dreamed of. We get to have that life worth living. And the deeper level is even when I pass, if I rely on God, I will be okay. And I will use that experience to help others. And you might be like, how do I use that experience to help others? Well, as I continue on this journey of my life, everything that I go through in my life, I talk a lot about the economy of grace, where nothing gets wasted. Nothing gets wasted. And I use it to help others. Sorry guys, we're going on a tangent and it's going to be a bit of a heavy one. This past spring, I sat with my uncle for 9 days as he passed. And it was a really not a pleasant passing. It was horrific. He was in a lot of agony, physical agony, spiritual agony, emotional agony. He didn't want to die and he was suffering and there was nothing. And I could bear witness to it and I could do the best I could to help, but there was nothing that we could do to alleviate it. And it was absolutely horrific. And there was a whole lot that happened, but to be mindful of time. Well, and two things. The presence of God was there. The presence of God was undeniably there, without question. But also, after he passed, I went home, and I think it was the next day I had a sponsee booked. And I let her know, like, I'm pretty transparent with my sponsees. I'm like, hey, this is what's going on. Because I don't want them to think it's about them, that I'm like, and I'm in a weird mood because of them. No, I'm in a weird mood because of me. I always just do that. So my sponsees always know when I got a headache or a hang up or a defect. They know. And I sat down with my sponsee and she knew, and she said, hey, just so you know, I'm not going to be in a really good place. My partner, his mom was airlifted to the hospital and she's in ICU and she's in a coma and he's waiting with her right now. And so we said a prayer and we got into the work and she's like, man, I just wish I knew what he needed. And I, who had been just in the hospital for 9 days, I knew some of the things that he would need that he wouldn't think to bring. And see, that's what I mean, is everything gets used. Everything gets used. A little while after that, I had a rough year. But a couple of months shortly after that, I found out that an ex had passed away. And that was tough. Quite often I'm like, he was the last man that ever really loved me, which I know is overly dramatic. I hear it. But he passed away, and literally half an hour later, I'm with the sponsee and we're working on sex conduct. In the economy of grace, nothing gets wasted. And my experience is always able to help others. All right, so the next one is growing old and alone. All right, so why do we have that fear of growing old and alone? Well, there's no control. There's elements of growing old that are inevitable. That a loneliness can be painful, and I don't know if I'll be able to care for myself. I know for me, quite often I have a fear of being a burden to other people. And again, we see where those are some real fears that we can add to column 1. And so in column 3, how has self-reliance failed me? Well, I will probably not grow old the way that I was living my life. Probably won't have that privilege. Also, I probably will not maintain and sustain healthy relationships, even if I'm sober, but not fully active in this way of life. See, I erode relationships with self-centeredness. I will also erode relationships with codependency. I won't have a sex ideal that I live up to. And I know I'm kind of throwing us into next week a little bit, but it is an ideal about who I am meant to be before, during, and after a relationship. Heck, I won't even know who to be in relationships or how to be in relationships. And I'm so desperate for somebody to fill that void that I'll grab anyone. And I'll maybe grab somebody with a lot of red flags. Now, there's no judgment. I have been known to be a bit of a carnival myself, all the flags. But I'll grab onto someone, to anyone, to make me feel okay without discernment. I won't communicate, or I'll isolate, and I'll do all those things, right? Then just kind of throwing out some examples. Now, we'll say the prayer. God, remove my fear of growing old and alone, and direct my attention to what you would have me be. I thought of some other good ones to add to column 3, but essentially, I won't work the steps, so I won't stay sober. And I won't continue to work this way of life. And in so doing, I'm more likely to hurt people. I'm more likely to act out of selfishness and self-centeredness and not make my amends. I'm also far more likely to grab on to codependent relationships. Also, you know what I will be doing? Actively sponsoring others because my life depends on it. And I know, and many times what we're after is that romantic companionship. But I am going to have a host of friends, a community that comes up around me as the result of one alcoholic helping another. I will be a part of the world. And I know it sounds stupid, me saying I know about the aging process. I know. But I know that the process of aging is a series of letting goes, and a series of surrenders, and a series of these things that I used to be able to do that I can no longer do. I know that, and I don't know that, but as somebody who experiences disability, like I've seen that process, and I've seen it mirrored. And I mean, who here hasn't fought using a walker? Am I right? You know what I mean? Everyone. Yeah. When we all get there, we'll all be like, I don't need one. And I'm like, I went through that, economy of grace. I've been there. But I'll practice. I'll have active spiritual practice with letting go and trusting God on a daily basis with all these things. So I will let go of the idea of how I think my life should be. I will let go of the unrealistic, unreasonable, unfair expectations, and live in the here and now, live in this present moment. And maybe accept a little bit of help. Maybe even ask for help. I know, crazy thought. And it's not like I'm good at it either, guys. It's not like I'm over here being like, some help. No, I will suffer in silence. I'm good. Like it's a practice and it's a process, right? And so again, the deeper level, even if I die alone, grow old and die alone, if I rely on God, I will be okay. And I will use that experience to help others. And then we got a little bit of a lighter one. I'm gonna do finding a place to live. Well, because I know these have been some heavy fears, but they're real fears. They're life and death fears, because that's what we have. And I know, by the way, if you're, worried about finding a place to live, it's like, excuse me, Paige, I am in this situation. it's a little heavy. Fair enough. Yes. Also, I'm just going to share with you my experience because I have, been in recovery 13 years. And oftentimes I'll work with sponsees who are in a treatment center. And that getting out of a treatment center is they're always, always, always afraid of not having a place to live. And that's so, so, so understandable. I so get that. And I've never, in the course of these 13 years, seen anyone who continued on with the program, who did this work, and as a result stay sober, end up homeless. I haven't seen it. I'm sure we can find some examples, but I haven't seen it. So, but not finding a place to live, why do I have this fear? Am I going to be homeless? There's no control. Am I going to be able to afford to live? Am I going to have roommates that are gross and they snore, or am I going to have roommates that are not accepting of me being gross and me snoring, those sorts of things. And in the third column, well, I'm going to drink. I'm going to relapse because I'm not going to work the steps. And I don't know about you, but I'm not really good roommate material in my active addiction, in my active alcoholism, right? I can also look at, I don't know about you, I get overwhelmed. And I get into that analysis paralysis and I won't take action. I don't know about you, but I'll jump at the first opportunity out of fear and out of anxiety, and it's something that's better than nothing. And I won't use discernment, and I won't think about it, and I won't pray about it. I also want you to know that thing that I also won't do, which is asking for help. I won't. We have a community of people who maybe might know of a place to stay or vacancies. I won't ask for help. I won't communicate, right? I'll also, a lot of us, I don't know if you're aware, alcohol, drugs, expensive. So are those things that we often turn to instead of God, like shopping, gambling, that stuff can be expensive. All I'm saying is, when I'm on self-will, I'm more likely to act out financially, limiting my options. Hey, again, I'll just throw it out there. I don't know about you guys, but I am not little miss employable when I'm on self. Now, I don't even need to be little miss employable when I'm drunk. When I'm sober. I'll show up to an employment situation. You should late, if at all, and you should be lucky to have me. Don't you know? You know what I mean? Show up with a what can I get mindset, and I get resentful real quick. They don't appreciate me and my goodness, right? So that's how I'm showing up. Less likely to stay employed, not great financial management, right? So we say the prayer, God, remove my fear of not finding a place to live and direct my attention to what it is you would have me be. Every time I say that prayer in this example, I think of other ones to add to column 3, which is not a good order of things. But we can look at, hey, I'm going to stay sober. I'm going to rely on, not on my power, as the result of actively working these 12 steps as a way of life. I'm going to have a community around me. I'm going to show up with what can I give? How can I help? I'm going to take small steps towards that goal of finding a place to live. I'm going to ask for help with it when needed. And believe me, when we say asking for help, man, that's not easy. I'm going to allow somebody to be of service. It's another way to look at it. Maybe a little less of an overwhelming way to look at it, right? I'm just creating service opportunities. You're welcome. Help me, help. Right? So that's another way that we can do that. We're going to be able to pray, to meditate. So we come back to the present moment. So I'm not in there obsessing about the house, obsessing about this, obsessing about that. I'm going to be in the here and now. Thank you. I did a pun. Anyway, and so the deeper level is, even if I cannot find a place to live, even if, and again, we can take it to the utmost extreme, even if I'm homeless forever, if I rely on God, I will be okay. And I will use that experience to help others. Yeah. Hey, buddy. And okay, last one is a heavy one, is, a loved one passing away, a wife or a spouse. So why do we have that fear? Because, oh God, that would be painful. That is awful. That is hard. It's grief. Can I stay sober through it? What will I be? You know, of course, all those things. Now, the third column, that third column, of course, you know, we can look at, you know, I'll be drunk, I'll be ruining the relationship. But also in the third column, I won't spend that time. I won't give to that relationship. I won't show up with gratitude. I won't cultivate, you know, that relationship in a loving, present, grateful way. I'll have amends unsaid. I'll have amends undone and things left unsaid that I ought to say. Oh, you know, I'm sure it's not just me, but me. I tend to be the biggest jerk to those who are closest to me, you know, and I'll act in that way with my loved ones, right? And so, and damage the relationship, not be appreciative, not be there. We say the prayer, God, remove that fear of losing a spouse, a wife, a loved one, and direct my attention to what it is you would have me be. We're going to show up and we're going to work these 12 steps and we're going to work them hard. And as a result, we're going to show up in a kind, loving, considerate way, where that relationship is going to be about what we can give, not what we can get. And we're going to be fully grateful and appreciative. And I can't do that on my own power. I need God. I need meditation to even be a little bit in the present moment. You know, otherwise I'm over there thinking about other things. To be in the present moment and to have that full heart of gratitude for that human being, to really appreciate it, that moment, that relationship, that person, right? And the relationship is going to be the best it could possibly be, you know, and we get to give to that relationship. And of course we're going to have other relationships outside of the marriage or that, you know, romantic relationship. And what I mean by that is we're going to have friends, we're going to have sponsees, we're going to have a sponsor, we're going to have those pillars, that community around us. Again, to help us be the healthiest person, but help us through those difficult times so we don't ever have to go through it alone. And the deeper level is even if I lose my loved one, I lose my spouse, if I rely on God, I will be okay. And I will use that experience to help others. Absolutely. Do we have a light one? Do we want to end on a lighter one? We got like a fear of public speaking or something. Yeah, what I'll do fear of public speaking. How do I do that? Because it's a little bit lighter, right? All right, why do I have that fear? Because y'all are going to judge me. Y'all are going to think I suck, and I'm going to embarrass myself in front of you, right? Because I'm doing it real time. It's happening. So how has self-reliance failed me? Anyone here ever turned down the opportunity to speak because, oh God, no, I don't want to do that, right? Isn't my orientation when I'm afraid to speak all about what I can get? I need you to like me. I need you to think I'm smart and I'm clever and I'm funny and I'm doop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop. Give me your value and worth. And so if you start checking your phone, I'm like, oh, no, I fall apart and I crumble. So I don't get that experience with it. I avoid it. It's about what I can get rather than give. You know, yeah, that's, we don't need to go into much depth. So we say the prayer, God, remove my fear of public speaking and direct my attention to what it is you would have me be. How do I rely on God while I work these steps? And every time that I have to speak, I can use, there's a beautiful, I didn't mean to share this, but there's this beautiful pocket prayer that I use whenever I have to speak. God, your words, my mouth. It's quick, it's easy. I like to use it before I have to talk. I can, your words, my mouth, and let go. I can focus on how can I be the most helpful to others, letting go of the results. Also, as I work the steps, one of the things that happens to me is I become less judgmental, less critical of others. There's an interesting correlation between my judgment of you. Am I afraid that you're going to judge me? The more that I judge, the more that I criticize, the more that I gossip, the more I'm afraid of those things. But the more I live in that place of like, and honestly, that fourth column, that grace, that, man, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to go around and pump your tires. I'm going to tell you how great you are. I'm going to tell you how grateful I am for you. One of my favorite things to do is tell people they're God's favorite. You know, I'm going to go out and do that. When I do that stuff, I see that it is abundant and I'm not as afraid. And the more that I work these steps, the more that my reliance shifts from people to God. And so you can judge me and you can think I'm a weirdo, and that's fair. That actually might be an accurate assessment of things. And I can still be okay. So that deeper level is, even if I'm the worst public speaker that ever public spoke, and I embarrassed myself at a Super Bowl level audience, if I rely on God, I'll be okay. And I can use that experience to help others, maybe through public speaking. All right, so why don't we leave it there, and we'll pick it up next week as we get into sex and relationship conduct. So